You have to listen to your own heart and not be beguiled or seduced or pushed into doing what the outside says you should be doing. Because only if you listen in do you know what's right for you. And then you have to become a fierce warrior to protect that. The way that I teach and works for me is to set up a sacred space in your world where maybe you collect some pictures that speak to you from albums of your childhood, because I think it's mostly getting in touch with that young self who got suppressed by the culture, because everything in the culture disconnects you from that knowing, that sort of naked, innocent child space. And it's a matter for me of finding our way back to listening for that voice.
Welcome to The Healing Blueprint. I'm your host, Jill Briansky. On this podcast, I speak with experts from traditional and holistic healing modalities. And together, we share insights, tools, and practical guidance so you can create your own healing blueprint. Let's move into today's episode and get started. Have you ever met someone who is so in touch with who they are that when you're around them, you feel like you can take a giant exhale? My next guest is the person who lives her life with such intention, you can't help but feel better in her presence. It is my pleasure to welcome Dr. Robyn Posin to the show. Robyn, welcome.
Thank you. That just brought tears to my eyes.
Oh, why?
I don't know, just being seen. Being seen is the biggest gift anybody can receive.
You live your life in such a way that you're not in the public eye. That's not your main purpose. But yet when people connect with you, they can't help but see you.
I like that. I mean, I really am because I'm so wide open, I don't really have filters. For whatever reason, I think it's how I came in. I'm very careful about where I put myself around whom I ever venture. And so I always feel safe to just be.
Has that been one of the big lessons for you, is creating a space where you feel safe?
Absolutely. I mean, to listen in to my being. I call it the little ones inside, but someone I've been relating to recently calls it listening to your somatic information. But I listen, and I have learned that if I don't pay attention and I override, I am in big trouble. So even if I can't figure out why I'm having an icky feeling, if I have an icky feeling, I leave. I excuse myself and go.
That's such a practice of honor and respecting who you are. How did you get there?
I actually recently recalled the moment that my life changed. And this is bizarre. I can't remember, was it second or third grade. I was at the wardrobe in the morning where we hang our coats. And there was a boy and a girl. I can remember the girl's face and even her name. Her name was Suzanne. And they were joking or talking. And I tried to join in. I don't know what I said, but whatever I said, they both turned and looked at me like I was from another planet. It was crushing, but in that moment, I understood something that has been the most valuable thing in my life. I understood that no matter what I did, I couldn't pass for normal. So I never tried.
I'm sort of stunned by that, because second or third grade, to have that type of awareness and still be accepting of that awareness, that seems really powerful.
Well, I spent most of my time alone at home. My father always would comment on the fact that I only had one friend every year, and it was the same one through public school and the same one through junior. But I read. I had fantasies. My Aunt Toby, who would bring me. She was a a legal secretary and the office manager of a legal firm. She would bring me a box of Ticonderoga #2 pencils, a typewriter eraser that was a pink wheel with a metal thing that had a green plastic brush. And she'd bring me those pink message slips that existed way back then, and white pads of different sizes and legal pads. And I would sit in this big fan back upholstered chair, and I'd fold margins on the paper, and I would write. I would write stories or poems or nonsense, and I'd read. And so I lived in myself in a separate world. And I think that's part of what saved me and also made me not fit in. So I don't know. I would say probably that may have been as early as when the first time that the grandmothers, who are like my spirit helpers, were present to give me that knowing. It's bizarre. I mean, I can't imagine how I could get there that fast at that age.
Yeah. And I love this idea of the grandmothers. And for those that may not understand, what are these grandmothers?
Well, about 40 years ago, let's see, in 1984, I was working with a creative arts therapist, and she had me do some awake dreaming. And just in a semi-trance, I had this dream of floating down the river on a raft that led me into a cavern. And in the cavern, there was a gaggle of these zany, hysterically funny grandmothers of all ethnicities, with flabby arms and drooping boobs and missing teeth and wearing drippy drapey like pajamas, clothes, or caftans. And they welcomed me, and then they sang to me, and they bathed me in flowers, in water, in a declivity in this stone, in this cavern. And then they put me on a bier that was covered with something soft, and they massaged me, and they sang to me, and they gave me such a bath, total bath of love. And then they dressed me back up, and in the way of dreams, they set me on my raft, and the raft got carried back in the way that it came from. And ever since then, whatever I do, wherever I am, I sense this zany tribe around me, and they do the most amazing things to protect me. So I trust that they're always there. And I think that they may have been there before I saw them in this dream.
Yeah. And when you say zany grandmothery women in the way that you're describing them, they're making me giggle because they don't care what you think about them. They are just who they are. And I feel like that is the essence that you hold. So even though you didn't find your people necessarily when you were in childhood, you had your people.
Yes, I did. I do. And you know what? I have found my tribe. The grandmothers, that's spirit for me. They have brought the women I work with in my practice are all from this tribe. They're all, off center, living slightly off planet, really deeply inside themselves. And so the women that have become my friends are women who are like me, that it's too exhausting to be around ordinary people, because ordinary people are not in touch with all of what's going on inside of them. And so it sort of leaks out. And those of us who are sensitive wind up experience, like whatever's not owned lands in us. It's very exhausting.
Yeah.
So I don't do that. I'm very careful where I put myself.
And that in itself is a matter of respecting you and who you are and living your life with such intention. Like everything you do is done with intention. And so for those that are listening and may not know, how do you do that inner work? How do you get in touch with that inner part of you so that you don't leak out?
Well, there are probably many ways, but the The way that I teach and works for me is to set up a sacred space in your world where maybe you collect some pictures that speak to you from albums of your childhood, because I think it's mostly getting in touch with that young self who got suppressed by the culture, because everything in the culture disconnects you from that knowing, that sort of naked, innocent child space. And it's a matter for me of finding our way back to listening for that voice. Other people will talk about listening to your body. For me, the child is the way that I get to there. And so I would set, and there's no formal way to do it, but I give some concrete instruction so that you can have a sense to then play off of. But a candle, maybe some incense or sage, some pictures of your childhood self that call to you. And you come and you sit, and you can start for 5 minutes a day, light the candle, and ask her to tell you what she needs from you. And you may not hear from her for a while until she's convinced that you really mean to show up and be there. But she will always tell you what's so, because she hasn't been distorted by the enculturing process. So that's, for me, that has worked. And for the women that I work with, something like that works. But it's not literal. You don't have to do it exactly, but it's just, I give you that structure so that you can play with it and find what works for you. And I provide fat marking pens and blank paper and Sculpey, the clay, so that it's a polymer clay.
Okay.
And so you can, any art supply store has Sculpey, or Fimo is another version, or just plain Play-Doh, so that you can allow whatever wants to be heard to express itself, not just in your heart, but, through something tangible, like a drawing or scribble scrabble or words or clay figures, something like that. That's one way in. I mean, there are lots of other ways, but for me, that was the beginning.
You mentioned this idea that I'm just going to call it the inner child, the inner you.
Right.
It might be quiet for a while because, she needs to make sure that you're there and you're going to stay there. Is that the huge piece, this trust piece?
Yes, that's really important, because that part of us has been ignored in the world, and we've ignored it. So she needs to know that we're committed. He needs to know that we're committed, that we will show up and keep on showing up. And you don't have to do more than 5 minutes at a time. Just keep the commitment. And then if you want to spend more time, you do. But over time and repetition, that part of you will begin to trust you enough to maybe start to talk to you.
I think what you're saying is so important, because adults often assume that their inner child responds as an adult, and it doesn't. And everything you're saying is treat the child like the child, because the child's smart.
Absolutely. The child has a level of wisdom that you lose if you disconnect from her.
And as you said, with our society, do you feel like most people have disconnected when you call them ordinary people? I don't know whether I'm part of that group or not. I'd like to think I'm not, but who knows? Maybe I've got one foot in each world. I'm okay with that. But that part is really what guides us or moves us forward.
Absolutely. And are not listen. We have been trained not to listen. Think about it. When you're a kid and go hug grandma and you don't want to, you get pushed to go hug grandma. So what do you do with that part of you that doesn't want to hug grandma, that gets invalidated? I mean, that's just one thing, but that's everything in our socializing disconnects us from what we really feel, because we're supposed to act a certain way. Doesn't work for the long haul.
Yeah. And you have so many practices in place to keep yourself in alignment. I'm wondering where they came from, how you developed them.
You have to tell me what practices
Oh, the practices I'm thinking. Okay. So the practices that I'm thinking of are disconnecting from all media and I think it's a week out of every month, unless you've increased that. Your sleeping habits, which I'm sure most people not have, just as if that's okay to share.
No, I'm happiest when the world is asleep. So I do, I'm up until 3. What I do every day is somewhere between midnight and 3 a.m. I go out to my hot tub and I have a float, an 18 pocket blow up mattress. And I have 2 unblown up ones that are like a blanket. And I float and look at the stars and I take a nap. And in 42 years, I have never fallen off the mattress, which is what my friends' kids always worried about. But I float in and look at the stars and then I go to sleep and then I come in and I've been sleeping at night after that in a tent for another somewhere between 35 and 40 years in all kinds of weather. So I'm on the ground. So part of my night is on water and part of my night is on earth. And I think that accounts a lot for my stability and my health. I mean, I'm fully active, no pills, no medications, no things except like an inherited scoliosis at 3/4 of the way through my 86th year. I also do not be around people very much. I do one-on-one or one-on-two of people who are also in touch with themselves, but everything else is very minimal. I have sweet neighbors, but actually my neighbors are interesting too, because they're real people. That's what I mean about, I make a distinction and it's very invidious between real people and ordinary people. And ordinary people are people whose entire being has really been co-opted by the culture to not be in touch with what their sort of, innocent animal self would feel is the thing to say, do, or be. What else? I walk a lot. And I used to walk on trails where I would feel like the only person on the planet and love the feeling. It's no longer safe for me to do that. I feel I live in a community where there's lots of trees and things, but it doesn't matter. Just moving, and I garden. That the garden cycle helps me, especially in these crazy times, to know that things have a season. They bloom, they blossom, they die. They go back into the earth to fertilize new growth. That's an enormous help for me to remind myself when I'm in the middle of what's going on in the world right now.
And you don't mind being alone. You actually enjoy it.
I love it. I've never been lonely. Never. I am the best company I've ever had.
I love that.
It's how I survived my childhood. And I think it's also how I've survived in the world. I have been in 2 live-in relationships, each of them for 7 years. And the 8th year was a leading. And then I finally got that I don't do living with somebody. It doesn't work for me. And I have no apologies for that.
Nor should you. You're living your life on your terms.
Exactly. And I think that's my purpose on the planet, is to live life authentically and on my own terms, honoring my basic self. And that's a lot of what I try to teach. But I think the message gets through not through my conscious teaching, but just through the way that I do my life.
Well, you embody what you're teaching. Like you're a living representation of what you're trying to share with somebody. And so somebody witnessing you has more information than any words you could possibly impart.
Exactly. And I think sometimes it distresses me because I often see people who've seen other therapists, that a lot of therapists are people who have learned book learning, but they haven't done their own inner work. So they teach from this book learning, and the person is not there as a role model. Not that I consciously chose that, but I think that when you share your stories from having journeyed and done healing work, that's the biggest gift that you can give is, by example.
You may not have chosen to be somebody's role model, but you chose to show up for the people in your life, whether they're your clients or your friends, in a very present way.
Absolutely. Present, authentic, real.
And you've told me before, you don't show up with someone unless you can be present.
Absolutely. I don't want to be around people I can't be all of me with. I mean, I don't have to be spilling my guts, but I have to feel like this is a person who lives inside of themselves, who's in touch with their own emotions, who doesn't take on mine or need me to take on theirs because they can't live with it.
Yeah. It's such an honoring of you and of them. That word just keeps coming out, and that connects me back to the grandmothers. And I'm going to make a really odd connection here. And maybe there's a connection and maybe there isn't, but it's been floating around in my head since you said it. You had said that you had a dream on a raft going down a river to meet the grandmothers. And yet you spend every day on a raft on your hot tub.
Oh my goodness. That just gave me chills. I never put that together. Wow. Wild. Thank you for that. That is, oh my goodness. That brings tears to my eyes again. Yeah. I float.
You float and then you ground.
Exactly.
There's something really profound in that connection. I don't know what it is, but perhaps it's coming to you on some level.
This is just how my life evolved. This evening routine. It wasn't a thought. It was just being led. And wow, I'm blown away by your connection.
Well, and so now I'm just going to expand on that for a second, because maybe there's something here. Maybe you're not being led. Maybe you're at a place where you don't need to go anywhere.
Well, that's 7 years ended in October since I published my last book and did a most extraordinary book signing, book reading that I had never done with the first two. And that was it. I've not been led except once a year when I get a drawing and I get words from the grandmothers for a solstice New Year's card. But other than that, I have not been led into any creative process that had an outcome. I've just been doing what I call my chop wood, carry water, tend the temple gardens life, that my life is full of maintenance. And at the beginning, well, the first 30 years of my life, I was a super achiever. I had to always be accomplishing, doing the next thing to maybe make me feel worthwhile. And then I'd finish whatever it was, and then I wouldn't feel any more worthwhile than I had before. So then I had a new thing that was the carrot in front that I keep on doing and doing and doing. And at 31, I realized that no matter how many pirouettes I continued to do, they were not the way to feel like I was a worthwhile human being. And so then I stopped and I walked out on my life and I set up a van as a sort of a womb's turtle shell that I would have everything with me all of the time. And I did nothing for 20 months to the beginning, didn't talk to people even. But the doing, not stopping doing was huge, really huge. But then when I came to this passage where I wasn't swept away with any creative juice, I would sometimes be totally fine, and sometimes I would get really crabby. And I'd really miss that being swept away feeling. And then I'd sort of tell myself, well, it's a 7-year cycle. But then the 7-year cycle ended, and it's still the same, that I'm not doing anything, and I'm seeing fewer people in my work, which is really fine. So I've come this year, since October last year, to being like, this is what my life is. My life is chop wood, carry water, tend the temple, tend the kitties, tend my garden. That's it. And I don't feel not worthwhile at all. It's amazing. I mean, considering the trajectory and even the more recent trajectory, that I'm not waiting to finish my chores so I can begin my life.
Every time I talk to you, which recently has been more than not recently, you're always so happy. And I imagine people are thinking, wow, if that's what I had to do every day, just maintain, that wouldn't make me happy. That would make me miserable. I'd be waiting for things to happen and things to start. But you're so in love with your life.
It doesn't mean that sometimes I don't get grouchy or grumpy or agitated, but they're not very often. That I feel so blessed. I have nobody. This is my mantra. I have nobody left to drive me crazy. My dad is gone. My sister is gone. My stepmom is gone. My mother's been gone for 50 years. The only person left to drive me crazy is me. And I've given that up. So what could be bad about this?
Seemingly nothing. Seemingly nothing. And I want to tag onto something you said a little bit ago where you were talking about your books and you were talking about the information that came through the grandmothers. And for people that aren't aware of your work and what you do, can you just explain how the grandmothers have come through and the information that they've given you and the way you have disseminated it?
So in 1991, my one close friend from college was dying. And I would go up to San Francisco to support her daughters and her son as they were with her in the process. And so I wound up sleeping for this week or so that I was there, this particular time, sleeping on the floor next to her bed. And these messages came to me and I wrote them down. And then more came after that. So I wound up with, it's 59, it's actually, 59 reminders from the great mother or the grandmothers. And I was then led to make a deck of cards out of them that are called Loving Reminders of the Great Mother's Voice that you can use as an oracle. And they are, I'm going to pull one from a stash over here. Let's see what it says.
Okay. For those of you that are listening, these cards are absolutely beautiful. And every message hits your heart in a different way. And so I love the idea that you can just pull one for the day and say, oh, what beautiful message can I share with my soul today?
That's lovely. That's that's what they are. They came to me. I feel like I'm the feet and the hands of the grandmothers walking their messages back into the world. So this is the card I picked. Can you see it? Just the
Can, but our listeners can't.
Okay. It's just like I'm trying to think, like a calligraphic drawing of a mother holding a child. And it says, when the wounded parts of you feel sad, frightened, unhappy, lonely, or yearning, it's almost always your own attention and comforting they are needing. Practice taking time and space just to listen to those parts with the same gentle, loving patience with which you would listen to the distresses of any beloved friend.
I think that is so impactful because your statement is not only connecting to where someone is, but showing them a way through. And that way through isn't going outside of themselves.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
And that's how you live your life is this. I think one of your statements is be gentle with yourself, be kind with
Yes.
yourself.
Yes. Talk kindly and lovingly to yourself as much of the time as possible. Go only as fast as your slowest part feels safe to go. And remember that rest is a sacred act.
And it's so powerful coming from you because you live that.
Yes. I think that's the difference. I walk the talk before I talked it publicly.
Yeah. And people can feel that. So even though your circle might not be big, those people are getting impacted with such a tremendous amount of love because it radiates out of you.
I never think about that.
I know. I'm just trying to reflect you back to you because you're one of these people that just reminds me that everything is okay in the world and you can just come back to yourself. No matter where you are and what's going on inside can be.
And these days, that's really important.
Agreed.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Agreed. Very, very powerful statements. I view you as one of the great grandmothers. And I'm wondering if you have felt not just as a student of the grandmothers, but as really part of what they represent in the world.
Well, I think how I hold myself is that I've been deputized by them to walk their message out in the world, and that I can use my life and my own experiences authentically to do that. And that I see mostly in the last several months, I've been getting this reflection back. I mean, I don't usually pay attention on that level, but I've been getting repeat messages like the ones that you're giving me, that just how I'm doing life, even when I'm doing absolutely nothing, as I would say, any redeeming social value, that just the way that I live my life and that I do it openly is really their message coming through me, that I then become a vehicle because I've committed to living life on the terms that they have taught me. I guess I am becoming a grandmother too.
I feel like you are.
It's so fascinating. I knew at 12 and a half, this is another quick story, I got my period. And I called down, I had a mother from hell. I called down the stairs and said, Ma, I got my period. And her response was, the Kotex is in the closet, in the linen closet. And as I sat there trying to figure out what the hell to do with this Kotex, I figured out to safety pin it to my underpants. But I had a voice in my head that now I believe was my first conscious contact that said, don't worry, you won't ever have to have children.
Wow.
12. And I only revisited that once when I was about to marry the guy that I had been living with on and off, in and out of each other's spaces 9 times in 2 years. And these two brilliants decided maybe if we get married, we might figure it out differently. Well, anyway, but I've never had one iota of feeling like I made a mistake. I never wanted. I have never felt any interest, but I see that in what I share, that I really am doing that. That I'm mothering or grandmothering in a way that just involves me being me rather than doing something. And for that, I'm enormously grateful.
And as someone who has the privilege of being in your space every now and again, I am also grateful. Because you know my story too. The world isn't always rosy, but you have always been this guiding light that says you don't have to do it the way everybody wants you to.
That is probably the most important thread that I carry into the world, is that you have to listen to your own heart and not be beguiled or seduced or pushed into doing what the outside says you should be doing. Because only if you listen in do you know what's right for you. And then you have to become a fierce warrior to protect that.
What do you mean a fierce warrior?
Well, you have to be there. So when somebody tries to give you shit about how you are or how you should be, that you allow that to be about them. And you can say, I hear what you think. It's not right for me. And so being able to be there to support and advocate for just exactly what works for you.
Thank you, but no.
Yes, absolutely. And I've learned sometimes I'll get a message, it used to be that I would be in some social context, even with people that I choose to be around. And I would get this nudge from inside that it was time to go. And I would try to talk her out of it. And so what happened was she'd have to give me that message way earlier than I actually needed to go, because she had to leave room for me to nudge. And now as soon as I get the message, I say, thank you, I'm out of here. And everyone in my life accepts that because I accept it. If you don't fully accept what's so for you, you have Velcro on you, and everybody else's exceptions can stick on it. But if you really know and accept that this is right for you no matter what, you don't have Velcro. And so nobody can stop you and nobody can lay their crap on you.
So many powerful messages coming from you today. Any final words?
Just that the best friend you can possibly have is yourself, and to really listen to your whatever comes up inside of you and trust that without challenging it. And it doesn't matter if it's right or wrong or crosswise. It's what's so for you in the moment. It may not be so for you in a day, but right now, this is where you are. And the way to be living in healing and health and peace is to listen to what's so for you. Does that work?
Really powerful. Works for me. If someone wanted to know more about you or find your books, how would they do that?
The book there's a website. You can go to robynlposin.com. I think it may have a PhD at the end, or you can go for the little ones inside, or you can go compassionateinc.com. All three go to the same place. The book is actually the books are on Amazon. And when I went to do them, I decided not to try doing standard publishing because I knew nobody, that was before it became so impossible anyway, but I knew they wouldn't let me have the title. And I wanted the title so that even if you didn't buy the book, you got the message. And the title is Go Only as Fast as the Slowest Part of You Feels Safe to Go.
Beautiful messages all around. I am so grateful that you said okay to be on this show today. Thank you. Thank you. And for all the listeners, I'm saying thank you again. I appreciate your time.
Oh, this has been delicious. And I'm delighted to be able to do it because I don't do any other media.
I know, which is why I'm so, so grateful that you said yes. This message is really powerful, and I really feel like people need to hear what you have.
I'm grateful. I agree, but I don't know that I need to go out in the world and do it. This was such a wonderful opportunity because I love you, and this was so sweet and painless for me.
I'm glad.
But I'm very grateful.
That's a wrap for this episode. Honor what landed, release what didn't.
And we'll see you next time on The Healing Blueprint.